Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm here in the shop and I wanted to talk to you about buying fabric. So when you're buying fabric, we buy it in yards in the US. So how do you know how many yards to get? How do you know what you're going to get? I'm going to talk about all that right now. So when you look at the bolts of fabric, most of them you'll see are about this size. So they look like this and they're doubled on the bolt. So what it looks like here is about 22 inches. But what you actually have here is about 44 inches of fabric because it's folded. So you can see the folds up here and then the raw edges are at the bottom. You can lift away and see that it's folded. So when you buy fabric, if it is this size bolt, it's always going to be 44 inches by whatever you have the person cut. So if you would get a yard, which is 36 inches, then you would have a piece that is 36 by 44 inches every time. Except some fabrics are just slightly different on that 44 inches. Some are more like even 41, some are as high as 45, but it's gonna be around 44 inches by whatever you get, if it's this size bolt. So then you'll see sometimes there are bigger bolts that things like knits come on. So I'll show you that. Here's one of the larger bolts. And these are usually going to be 58 or 60 inches wide. So same thing, it's doubled on the bolt. So whatever you buy is going to be 58 to 60 inches wide by what you get. So 1 yard is going to give you a piece that's 36 inches by 58. So how do we know how much to get? How much is a yard? What does that look like? Well, let me show you what you can make with some common amounts of fabric, and we'll talk about how many inches are in the different increments of yards you can get. So let's go over to the cut table. Okay, so here is a nice chart from Fave Quilts. You can get this at seamsandscissors.com, and this is how many inches each fraction of a yard is. So we know that a whole yard is 36 inches. So we have all the measurements all the way down to 1/8 of a yard, which would be 4.5 inches. So let's look at our cutting mat here. So when you go to the store, they will have something like this. And this is our mat that's measured in 1-inch squares. So if you were to come to my shop and ask me for 1/8 of fabric, I would line the fabric up at the edge here. Actually, I let it overhang, so I give you a little extra. And then I would go to the 4.5 and I would cut all the way up. And so then you would have a little strip all the way up that's 44 inches by 4.5. Okay, so here's our bolt of fabric. I'm going to cut out some half yards and some fat quarters. And we're going to have a dyeing workshop, so I'm going to need a bunch of pieces for people to dye. Okay, so let's do a half yard first. So we said 36 inches was a yard, so that would mean half of that's a half yard. So here's 18 inches. So again, I'm just going to make sure that the fabric is definitely at or past the 0 line, and then make sure that it's pretty straight with one of these lines here. And then we're going to find the 18, and then I like to go just a little bit to the right of it and cut so that I know they got a little extra. So I'm going to go to the 18, and then this is a way that you can cut really straight. I know this is more about if you're going to buy fabric at the store, but if you were cutting it, then this is how I like to cut straight using my mat. So I just start cutting and then lift away with your left hand. That way you can see that the scissors are still on the line or right next to the line, wherever you want them to be. Okay, so we have a half yard. So you can see if you were to open this up, it is actually 44 inches, and then it's 18 inches this way. So a half yard is 44 inches by 18, and that's what we have here. So then what's a fat quarter? Well, first let's back up and talk about what a quarter is. So if we were doing a quarter of a yard, okay, so we have to do some math or look at our chart and find that a quarter of a yard is 9 inches. Okay, so that would mean we would just line up the edge of the fabric at the 0, and then we would go to the 9 and we would cut. So a 1/4 yard would give you this narrow strip that's 44 by 9 inches. That's kind of an unusable piece. Not really, but for a lot of projects it is. So sometimes you might like to have a 1/4 yard, but not have it in a narrow strip, and that's what's called a fat quarter. So to get a fat quarter, you take a 1/2 yard, and all you do is cut right here at the fold. So if we take our 1/2 yard and we cut it in half like this, it's going to make 2 fat quarters. And a fat quarter is approximately 18 by 22 inches. So that makes sense with our math. It should be 44 inches when it's folded. It's no longer folded, so now it's 22 inches, and it's 1/2 yard, so it's 18. So now instead of a 1/2 yard, we have 2 fat quarters. So that's what those are. So those are really the basics that you need to know. But again, if you wanted to order one of these other amounts at a fabric store, they would be happy to do any of these for you, and most places are happy to cut fat quarters for you too. Okay, so that's great, but how do you know how much you need to make something? Well, just as a general rule of thumb, I like to think about a 1/4 yard will make you like a small bag. A 1/2 yard will make you a bigger bag. A full yard will make you a pillowcase. Then I know for myself, if I wanted to make a clothing item like maybe, let's say, a long sleeve shirt, I'm going to need about 2.5 yards. Okay, and then if you're using a pattern, they will tell you what you need. So if you look at this pattern, you'll even see it tells you how much to get, and it also does say this is dependent on whether your fabric is 44 inches wide or 58 inches wide. And then you would go to the size that you need, and then it would tell you how many yards to get. So that, my friends, is about all I have to say about buying fabric. So I hope that helps you next time you go to the fabric store, and I hope that you are not overwhelmed and that you are able to easily order that fabric. So if you need to order fabric off the internet, go ahead and go to our website, shoppindrop.com. You can order in all kinds of increments, and you can get all these lovely things. So thanks so much for tuning in. Happy sewing!